Hello everybody and welcome to this review/experience video talking about Pokemon Legends Arceus. In recent years, the Pokemon franchise has caused much controversy, and the community has been split over and over again. Especially the Switch entries to the series have had their share of heated debates around launch time, yet sales were booming with every release, and it would appear that there was hardly any reason for Game Freak and the Pokemon Company to take a risk and switch up their formula like Zelda did with Breath of the Wild. But against all odds, we got the announcement for Pokemon Legends Arceus. That in the Sinnoh region of Old, referred to at that time as the Hisui region, we were presented with sandbox-style gameplay and seamless transitions in and out of battle. A wild and new world for us to explore in never-before-seen ways. We seemingly had a game that breaks up the system the mainline Pokemon games have utilized for 25 years on the horizon. A lot of people were excited for this one, me included. Now, before we get into this game and this review, let me give you a little history of my connection to the Pokemon franchise, so you know what to expect here. I've been playing Pokemon pretty consistently since Generation 3, starting from Ruby. Personally, I was one of the people who were pretty disappointed with recent Pokemon games, especially Gen 8. In fact, the latest addition to Gen 8 prior to Arceus, Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, were such a dumpster fire for me I sold it off on eBay shortly after trying it out. I mean, I get that they outsource these remakes, but how do you just carbon copy Diamond and Pearl while ignoring Platinum's improvements and then still slap a $60 tag on that? And that's not even the end of it. They spent multiple patches on bug fixes to counteract the game being beaten in times lower than the top speedruns in their original DS release counterparts. And speaking of those 15-year-old counterparts, they also had more functional online features, with the GTS still missing months after release, and the online rooms blatantly showing false advertisement of filled rooms, while in reality it took them 3 whole months to add this, as only 2 people could be in the same room at launch. Taking social distancing a bit too literal there. We're talking about a AAA Pokemon mainline game, by the way. It's easy to miss. There's a lot more to talk about here, but this video isn't about Gen 8 or my problems with it. So to summarize, I've seen the games through the years, but haven't been too impressed recently. If you enjoyed the recent entries, then I'm very happy for you. I'm just warning you that I will use them as negative examples if necessary. With proper evidence, obviously. Now, back onto Arceus.
And now for something completely different.
First of all, let me run down the story for you, since it's a pretty big part of the game. As stated before, if you wish to avoid spoilers, I'd advise you to not watch this video any further. While I originally intended to go through the story in a pretty detailed manner, I did realize that that would take quite long and be kinda boring. And also, if you want more context on the story, then please play the game, because for Pokemon standards, the game's story is actually pretty good and very akin to the Mystery Dungeon series. Alright, here we go.
3, 2, 1, go!
You start off with Arceus handing you an iPhone and telling you to seek out all Pokemon. He then yeets you onto a beach all the way from a huge space-time rift atop Mount Coronet. Also, you're in the past now.
That's quite big. Impressive.
A man with questionable fashion sense wakes you up, realizes that you're actually pretty talented when it comes to Pokemon, and recruits you into the local survey team. Since these people don't have ridiculously large iPhones from God, they have yet to receive the message informing them that they have plot armor against Pokemon, and they don't actually have to be scared of them, because nobody dies in a children's game. Oh, okay then, I guess Pokemon is hardcore now. Anyways, since everyone else struggles with catching Bidoof, you're tasked with the catching and the fighting jobs. So you travel to all the different locations in the region, make some new friends, and beat up some very angry glowy Pokemon. Here's a montage.
お前はもう死んでいる。何？
Oh, fuck. I can't believe you've done this.
1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
It's time to stop! It's time to stop, okay? No more! Where the fuck are your parents?
ゴジラ。ゴジラ。ゴジラ。
After beating all of those, most people kind of hoped that the giant doomsday rift in the middle of the region would just leave. But actually everything gets worse, and the commander blames you because you literally fell out of that very rift and are naturally just better than the rest of the survey team at basically everything for no good reason. Can't really blame him for coming to that conclusion. You're not really making an effort to be subtle with your talents. So they exile you, and they won't undo it unless you fix the whole end of the world sky problem. Luckily, the authority of the commander is pretty shallow, and most people just kinda keep helping you in more or less obvious ways. One of those people is Volo, this guy. And he leads you to some secret camp where this random sage-like lady tells you to go find the Lake Guardians and make a red chain to bind the world. So you travel to all of the Lake Guardians, prove your worth in their challenging puzzles, and finally make the red chain. With that done, you return to the village to tell them about your success. Unfortunately, you are informed that the commander chose violence and went to the top of Mount Coronet early, so whatever would come out of the rift could, and I quote, catch these hands. So you follow him to Zoe's Peak, and beat up him and his sole follower, the cook of the village, who is apparently a ninja. Seriously, this man has no authority, not even the security department followed him up there. Anyway, he submits to the supreme power of a 15-year-old and lets you handle the situation. After you arrive at the temple on the peak, some mind break happens, and depending on some previous choices, either Dialga or Palkia wants to aid you in battling their respective counterpart, who is apparently very angry. To test you, they just kinda jump you, you throw the red chain at them, the chain shatters, but the legendary is also less angry now. So you beat him and catch him, and then you leave because second very angry legendary is making a fuss, and the Lake Guardians apparently just gave you a one-use red chain. Thanks for that. Following that, some intermission happens and the survey team makes a Pokeball out of the shattered red chain, and you go back to the mountaintop to finish the job. The next legendary drops down on you from the rift and transforms into its new origin form. Depending on your choices, you are either up against Centaur Palkia, who apparently didn't need arms back in the day, or Metal Bambi Dialga. You beat them up and catch them in your fancy new Pokeball, and bam, credits roll. But wait, you say, the game is called Legends Arceus, but you haven't even seen Arceus yet. How can it be over? Well, allow me to introduce you to the post-game, which kind of feels more like the actual ending. During the main game you've collected the type plates associated with Arceus, but you're still missing a few. You've usually gotten these from strong Pokemon, aka the Lords, of the different clans, so Volo once again drags you to Lady Kogida and asks her for information on more powerful Pokemon in the region. She tells you about some legendaries running around the region, and it hardly gets stronger than that. So you go and catch a few angry legendaries and steal their plates until you're only missing one plate. With no clues left for the last remaining plate, an increasingly erratic Volo ominously leads you to a broken statue of Giratina, and after giving you a short history lecture, asks you to join him at the ruined temple atop Mount Coronet. Blatantly ignoring this recent suspicious change in behavior, you follow your longtime companion to the mountaintop, and there awaits you one of the greatest moments in Pokemon history. This one deserves a tangent, so get some popcorn and be prepared. Volo starts off by informing you that there's no need to worry about the remaining Ghost Blade, as he has it. However, he doesn't quite intend to hand it over to you. Revealing himself in a completely new outfit, he explains that in his pursuit of mythological knowledge, he became infatuated with Arceus, the being wielding the power of creation, and the mystery surrounding it. In order to meet this god and potentially subjugate it to utilize its power in the creation of a new perfect world, he had you gather the plates, intending from the very start to take them away from you. He puts his dream and your wish to protect the existence of this region and its inhabitants on the line in a decisive Pokemon battle. And what a battle it is. As soon as that music hits, you know what you just got yourself into. Every aspect of this encounter is beautifully made. The atmosphere is tense, fitting for a fateful duel at the summit of the world. No other characters except for you two are there. Nobody to spot you or bail you out of this one. Just you and your Pokemon. As mentioned, the music is an absolute masterpiece, as Cynthia's ancestor brings with him a heavily reminiscent, but still Hisui-styled remix of the memorable Sinnoh Champion's very own theme. And that's not the last thing these two have in common, since Volo's choice in Pokemon is almost identical to Cynthia's original Platinum team, only differentiating in a switch up of Milotic with Hisui and Arcanine. And although a 4x weakness to ground and water seems like a somewhat suboptimal choice to replace the defensive powerhouse that is Milotic, it at least adds more offensive capabilities and some personality to his lineup. But even after you manage to beat this champion level roster, you are not quite out of this hell yet. While pondering why Arceus seems to favor you over him, despite his best efforts, his shriek pierces the air around Mount Coronet, and Volo assures you, this battle is far from over. Summoning the devil of the creation trio, Giratina, the two beings forsaken by Arceus join forces to take you down. Accompanied by one of the most stunning themes Pokemon has ever pulled out, like, seriously, look at this frame. Gives me goosebumps every time, I love it. The battle rages on, and you're up against a legend now. That's not all though, as Game Freak actually felt like making this a bit more challenging by not healing your team between these two fights. Though you're going into a fight against Giratina, whose stats are boosted by the way, after your team already got dropkicked by a champion level team beforehand, and when you finally feel like you're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel and that HP bar slowly dwindles down, Giratina literally throws an Uno reverse card in your face and awakens Origin Form, reviving itself with full HP. Yes, you're actually witnessing a 2, technically 3-phase boss fight in a mainline Pokemon game, and I could not be happier with it. After comprehending what just happened and probably getting beaten up once or twice by this onslaught of battles, you eventually reign victorious over the devil and are rewarded with the revelation that Volo was the one who summoned Giratina to this world in the first place, and commanded it to open the rift atop Mount Coronet, creating all the recent chaos in hopes of forcing Arceus to come out of hiding. He reluctantly admits defeat and acknowledges your strength. Seeing that his endeavors have failed and his hopes of a new world have been shattered, he bids you farewell forever and hands you the Ghost Blade. After all, with his plan in shambles, he hardly has any use for it anymore. You would expect us to arrest him or something, but really, most people in this region can hardly tame a Shinx. Though there's no hope anyone except for us can contain a dude with a Garchomp for all too long. And we have other stuff to do. So we just part ways the old-fashioned way, and that's the last we see of Volo, for now. He leaves, while you remain alone, at the top. You'll have realized that I went quite in depth with this fight in comparison to the rest of the story, and that's mostly because I absolutely love everything about this fight and see it as a phenomenal conclusion to the story. If I hadn't went off on this fight now, I'd have done it later when talking about the positives of the game, so I just put more details in it from the start for the sake of fluent progression. But we still haven't seen Arceus yet, and I've dragged this out long enough, so let's quickly wrap up the story, okay? Now in possession of all 16 type plates, your Celestic Flute transforms into the Azure Flute, but you still can't quite meet Arceus since you haven't fulfilled your task yet. So you seek out every Pokemon, some more tedious than others, like the God Cherim that had a catch rate bug and just became harder to catch than legendaries. And then you head back to the temple to quite literally meet your maker. After playing the Azure Flute, you're hit with another reference to the original unused Arceus event in DPP, as stairs of light form a pathway to the heavens, although this time it's a bit more extravagant than the old event where Arceus was just kind of standing 15 meters above Spear Pillar. Entering the domain of God, you're commended on your achievements and challenged to a final fight to demonstrate your progress. This is actually a pretty cool and decently hard boss fight, as Arceus utilizes moves from all 3 members of that creation trio, and can even change its type during the fight portions of the encounter to gain an advantage.
Oh no!
Nevertheless, with lowered stakes, it feels somewhat less flashy than your previous boss encounter, but still a very enjoyable final proof of power. After winning, you are awarded with a part of Arceus, so it can see the world through your eyes, and on top of that you get access to the Legend Plate, a new plate that gives Arceus type autocorrect on judgment. Pretty cool. But that's it. You've created the region's first completed Pokédex and fulfilled your task. That's the end of it, for now. So, now that we got that covered, let's get into the good parts and the bad parts of this game. You might be wondering why this excursion about the story was even necessary, but being familiar with the story is gonna be quite helpful for explaining a lot of these points. Now, let's start off with the bad parts and get them out of the way first. While I think it's been pretty obvious that I've enjoyed my time with this game quite a lot, that doesn't mean I don't have my share of problems with it. Starting with the point everyone loved to point out during trailers, the graphics. Ever since the release of some gameplay trailers, a lot of people have called the graphics crunchy, or somewhat mashed and outdated. This didn't change much with the official release, as a good few people still seem to be disappointed by the visuals of the game. And while I kinda see where they're coming from, I've seen worse, to be fair. It could definitely be better, and you can't forget that we are talking about the highest grossing video game franchise ever. But I do think the style works well for Pokemon, and most parts of the game look pretty nice. I don't think anyone really wants the game to look like this, so don't complain too much, you know? Now, the graphic glitches are a bit more notable and harder to justify, especially the interaction with most water sources seemingly activating Model Viewer and turning you into a 480p Minecraft character with hitboxes enabled. While it's not game-breaking or nausea-inducing, it definitely affects the immersion of the game, especially when it occasionally invades cutscenes, most prominently seen when the Lake Guardians disassemble your body into squares in order to judge your worthiness. Feels like a pretty easy to spot visual issue, so I assume it was just kinda ignored due to time constraints and the non-game-breaking nature of the bug. Don't know if they'll fix it, but it's not enough to really impair any gameplay aspects in a notable manner. Moving on to my next issue, the endgame. This one is a bit of a tricky one because the game is supposed to be a single-player story-focused experience, and games of that nature just kinda end at some point, without much incentive to continue playing. This was a known fact, and we were aware that online battles and similar interactions wouldn't be in this game. So I feel like it might be slightly unfair to judge the game on missing a sort of endless possibilities kind of ending, but I do think the situation could have been handled better. Even though I enjoyed the story all the way through, I haven't done much in the game after catching Arceus and completing all side quests. Aside from the occasional shiny hunt attempt, I didn't really feel like doing much of anything. Allow me to explain, the game mostly only rewards you for progress towards your actual task of researching and catching all Pokemon. After finishing that, your reward is the Arceus finale of the story, and after that it's mostly just left up to your personal goals. Researching every Pokédex entry to level 10, which also means reaching Galaxy rank 10, only rewards you with a shiny charm, which is cool, but given the new mass outbreak mechanic, one can easily hunt shinies at a comfortable rate without going through the tedium of fulfilling specific tasks for each Pokemon to level their entry up to rank 10. Using this mechanic even with the charm, your chances of encountering shinies aren't much higher. So you're kinda just doing it for the sake of completion. Which I didn't, so there's no footage here. Now, with no online battles and no hidden abilities or similar things to hunt for, you're mostly just left to exist in the world with not much to do. You can go shiny hunt as mentioned, and while some people are entertained enough by that to continue hunting for hundreds of hours, I personally get bored quite quickly from a mix of spam catching Pokemon and resetting the game. Since IVs and EVs have been altered quite drastically in this game, a change that is certainly nice during the playthrough, by dissuading the player from spending too much time on overly min-maxing, the game simplifies getting an optimal Pokemon quite a lot. If you're unfamiliar with the old IV and EV system, I won't go into detail on them here, as that would take quite some time, but I can assure you it required a decent bit of effort to get a quote-unquote perfect Pokemon. With breeding not in the game and an overall changed system, however, it becomes quite easy, as you just throw some gravel and training rocks at your Pokemon, and it just becomes stronger in the stat of your choice. So that's not really going to be much of a long time goal. But why even go through the effort of making strong Pokemon without online battles, you ask? Well, we have Unova's very own time-traveling amnesiac, Ingo, and the security core in Jubilife Village, who eagerly await you to challenge a few select characters in battle, including the man himself. But once again, there isn't much reason to even fight them. There's no notable reward for beating these guys. They just kinda give you the option to if you feel like it. You're effectively just left to your own devices without much incentive to make use of the few activities left after your adventure. Now, while some people are sure to find their enjoyment in these tasks, with or without reward, I think there's a very easy fix to make this more enticing for most players. And that is just by making completionism visible via an achievement system. As the Switch itself doesn't have such a system, an extra page on your Galaxy Team ID, similar to the guild card system Monster Hunter, specifically Rise, uses for achievements on the Switch, would be pretty easy. Just give the people an achievement for catching like 5 or 10 shinies, maxing out all the stats of a Pokemon, beating all of the trainer battles that Ingo offers you, and so on. And if you get all of these achievements, you get a gold medal on your ID. Gamers like shiny things. Doing achievements just for the experience can be fun, but there's usually at least one tedious grind involved with completing these games, and a fancy reward can go a long way to keep the motivation up. It's a simple but effective way to encourage players to try out every aspect of a game, and I think it would definitely help Legends Arceus out in this regard. Now, let's move on to the last negative point, the atmosphere. No, don't give me that confused look just yet. I know I praised the story and the atmosphere before, so how could this aspect of the game end up here? Well, it's pretty simple. The atmosphere is unfortunately incomplete. I'll give you an example. Remember that Giratina scene that I praised so much earlier? Yeah, although I overall still think the atmosphere in that scene is phenomenal, Volo explaining Giratina's assault with visible vigor is a bit quiet, to be honest. Here, let's listen in really quick without me talking over it. Hear something? Me neither. And that is because Pokemon refuses to incorporate voice acting into their games. I'm immediately reminded of Sword and Shield's intro, with Chairman Rose giving a speech in a roaring stadium, but he just speaks in text bubble. And there's so many impactful scenes that feel like they've literally been made with voice acting in mind, but there just is none. And especially in a story-focused game like this, a lot of emotion is lost when you just have to read out these lines one by one, instead of being able to experience them with more than just your visual sense. Lines like Thylene telling you that you will die in the wild if you fail your enrollment test or Volo's entire betrayal monologue would have so much more power behind them if they were said to your face, instead of just leaving it to the player to read it for themselves, while the characters try to, you know, silently look dramatic. Sadly, there's not much more to say about it. I feel like there's no good reason not to add voice acting into the game, even less so in a narrative-heavy game, where a ton of scenes would benefit from it and just kinda silently scream for a vocal presence. It's an unfortunate loss of character in a game that otherwise feels very alive. I could add on small stuff here, like the character drowning in shallow water before you get access to Basque Legion and similar slight annoyances. But most of those small quirks are rather hilarious than atmosphere breaking, so I'll just leave it at the major point. Finally, let's get to the good points of this game, before I give you my personal conclusion on this game and its impact on the Pokemon series as a whole. Let's go down the list, starting with, drumroll please, while not completely open world, the sandbox gameplay is a major selling point of Legends Arceus. For the first time in a mainline game, you're not following along established routes or cities. You are exploring a wild and mostly uncivilized land full of secrets. The maps in this game are beautifully crafted with hidden caves, mountaintops and groves all over the place, free to be discovered in your journeys. Something that I greatly appreciate in the way these lands are set up is the amount of love and detail in every one of these maps, and the way they are placed around the map. To elaborate on that, the story progression of this game only brings you to select places on each map, and covers far from the entire place. But in order to fill up your Pokédex, you are very much so encouraged to find every hidden spot and ecosystem these maps have to offer, completely on your own. The game doesn't hold your hand as you explore these regions, and I often found myself completing the story objective but still sticking around for sometimes hours, just exploring the remaining places of the region, excitedly looking for new Pokemon and hidden areas. And that's not all. Some areas are effectively locked for you at the start, not because of some invisible wall or other artificial ways of forcing a specific path of progression on the player. Instead, you just don't have the means to traverse specific terrain. A wide river in the Fieldlands will halt your progression until you've acquired the aid of Basque Legion, and a steep mountaintop in the Mirelands will be unreachable for you until you've gained the trust of Sneasler. All of this encourages exploration and returning to previous areas later on to access zones that have been unexplored thus far. It's a very fun and rewarding gameplay design that utilizes the new sandbox mechanics exceedingly well. I mean, really, I usually spend more time exploring than doing the story quest, especially during my first visit to a new zone. And I'd say that conveys the whole idea of researching previously unknown Pokemon and exploring habitats beautifully. A very well done adaptation of the sandbox principle into a Pokemon game. And also a pretty fun Easter egg hunt when you just find the location of future cities or other notable places before they were widely civilized. Next point, fluency and consistency. This point kind of overlaps with atmosphere, but I want to talk about some areas that are a bit more on the technical side of the game, so I split them up for clarity's sake. Also, I'm gonna make use of BDSP here to compare the two, because BDSP fails horribly in this category. For starters, the seamless transition between battles and overworld gameplay was a huge marketing point of Legends, and they certainly delivered on that. The only entry animation when starting combat are two black bars thinning the screen. You can even move your character while in battle, and when you move too far away from a wild Pokemon, the battle will get cancelled. This gives the gameplay a sense of fluidity never before seen in mainline Pokemon games. The system they've used for over 2 decades has always involved a clear cut between overworld and battle instance, yet that is mostly removed in this new entry. It's a great way to allow for more fast-paced gameplay while not forcing it on the player, and makes you feel more like you're actually existing in the world, and the world doesn't just freeze around you whenever you enter any combat. And yes, I know nearby unaggroed Pokemon just kind of fade out when you enter a battle, but come on now, it's the first game of its kind, and we both know you don't want that random auxiliary that's barely on your screen to suddenly attack you from 50 meters away while you're just trying to fight a Machoke. Anyway, that's not all. notice something different in the old system, visually. Yeah, I'm talking about the differing models. Now, I know that some of the previous 3D games already managed this, so in those cases only the fluidity really changes. But BDSP, as well as early 3D games and older 2D games of the series, utilized different models between the overworld and battle instances. Some of those games have valid reason for this, while others are questionable. Yet, with the change to the Switch and more powerful hardware than ever, modern 3D entries should have no good reason to actually implement this. BDSP is a great way to emphasize the importance of consistent character models. Since Legends has fluent transitions between battles, be it trainer or wild battle, and uses the same models for cutscene, characters don't just occasionally switch their appearances to fit a specific situation. They always appear the same, which may seem trivial in a 3D game, but the lack of this simple mechanic is one of my most disliked aspects of BDSP. As those games use vastly different models between overworld and battle, it feels weird seeing your character suddenly grow like 1.5 meters just by entering battle. You feel like you're entering a different realm to fit your current interaction. And that's the light version of the problem. The real problem here is when these lower quality models are being used for the majority of character interactions. If you need a very direct showcase of this phenomenon, look no further than the entire Spear Pillar section of the Sinnoh remakes. You're presented with this cinematic interaction with Cyrus and are face to face with a legendary force powerful enough to change the very fabric of reality. Yet it just doesn't feel the least bit dramatic when all of the characters look like Funko Pop figures, using the same 3 static facial expressions. It just loses all impact when nobody except for Dialga in this scene looks like they'd be tall enough to get through the security of a roller coaster. And after all of the drama and close-up dialogue is over, then do they pull out the 3D models exclusively for the battle, where Cyrus waves his arm around a bit and only uses his generic battle lines. Not to mention the generic battle background that genuinely looks like you've been transported to a pocket dimension, and the gigantic Dialga behind you just vanished to get some lunch. I don't want to rant about BDSP for too long, so I stop myself, but I believe my point is clear. And while I do acknowledge that games like Sword and Shield have been using the same models for overworld battles and cutscenes, Legends is the first game to combine it with fluent transitions, which very nicely highlight you as a part of the world, in contrast to how older games made you feel like the world revolves around you. Now let's move over to the aspect of atmosphere. It's kind of a part 2 to the whole fluency bit, but in this part I'll focus more on the gameplay elements and ambient effects that make the world feel alive, rather than the technical reasons I've mentioned prior, which initially allow the game to create a fluent living environment in the first place, by removing unnecessary cuts and interruptions of gameplay. We'll start with the Pokemon having a personality and specific habits. This ranges all the way from different species of Pokemon reacting differently to your approaches, to shy Pokemon becoming more bold and aggressive when in big groups, led by an evolved species or an alpha.
Come on over here! Come on over here! No, you flipped me off!
There are so many small changes in behavior, based on weather, time of day, their immediate surroundings, and so much more. Pokemon reacting to items landing next to them, or realizing when a Pokemon in their vicinity is hit with a Pokeball, some Pokemon falling asleep during specific times, some species fleeing from battle by their own volition because of their shy or scared nature, and I could go on with this for a while. A sign of a great living and breathing open world is when you just sometimes turn your camera and an unexpected event just jumps into your line of sight and catches you off guard with cuteness, hilarity, or just confusion. The good kind of confusion. Like this Wurmple breakdancing next to a tree while I try to be sneaky. Or Gyarados just going for a swim but in the air. I know it's technically a flying type, but try and tell me this doesn't look kind of cursed. Or sometimes you're just trying to catch a cute Teddiursa, but shortly after you've alerted the Horde, and an Ursaring is just sprinting towards you. A lot of people were disappointed by the small Pokédex, which was almost a given from the start with all of the new interactions and animations that had to be added. And at the beginning this had me worried too. I didn't like them cutting off Pokemon in basically all of the Switch games released so far. So why wouldn't I feel the same way now? Simple answer. Every Pokemon feels like an actual living being. They have favorite foods, specific habits, unique interactions, and all of this just made me way more engaged with them. Surprising even myself, I never felt like the selection of Pokemon was too narrow. I was simply way more open to utilizing Pokemon I usually never really cared about, because in previous games, Pokemon had little possibilities to actually show off their personalities. They were effectively just stat sticks, differentiated by base stats, move pool and appearance. But now I have Pokemon curiously walking up to me while I'm exploring the area, and how could I say no to such a nice offer of friendship?
That's the cutest fucking thing I've ever seen in my entire life.
All of these little nuances just add up and make you appreciate the individual Pokemon way more, which is why I constantly felt like searching for new Pokemon interactions and switching up my team as I went onward. The world and its inhabitants just genuinely seemed intriguing. Now add some really nice scenery to it, like seriously, even if the graphics are a bit lacking, this stuff looks great. And throw a banger OST in there that really captures the calm atmosphere of the land, while switching seamlessly to the ferocious, more energetic battle theme, embodying the untamed wildlife when needed. But we're still not done.
But wait! There's more!
Because for the first time in a while, we have a good story to make the human interaction part of the game also feel logical and interesting. Borrowing many aspects from the old Game Boy and DS Mystery Dungeon games. For once, people don't just see you as the good little neighborhood boy who never does anything bad and just strolls through the region and becomes the champion with no real opposition, besides people who are very obviously branded as the bad people. You're actually doubted and subjected to suspicion because of your unusual talent and unknown origin, and even exiled out of the very town and team you've helped ever since your arrival. Furthermore, you're manipulated and used for the ulterior motive of another character, only to be ultimately betrayed by them. It's refreshing seeing characters having their own goals and different motives for acting the way they do, not just everyone blindly supporting you with no sense of competition, envy or greed. And I guess if we're talking about Mystery Dungeon, I do have to mention the very beginning of the game, where you're effectively faced with the very same situation of a mysterious voice talking to you and informing you of your current situation. Although Arceus is a bit more direct by revealing itself almost immediately and just making you work for it. Follow that up with memory loss, landing on a beach in an unfamiliar world, and being found by an important support character who urges you to join a local organization, which then leads into your entire journey. Although not being a Pokemon in Legends is a pretty big difference, to be fair. And before anyone tries to accuse the game of copying, the elements I mentioned are utilized in very different situations and contexts, and the characters have very unique reasons to interact with you in these ways. The shared overarching themes in these games is just quite notable, and honestly, I'm really happy that they went with Mystery Dungeon as their inspiration. Those games are starting to get a bit old, and a solid few newer players probably don't even realize these similarities. I definitely appreciate it, as the old Mystery Dungeon games had great storytelling, and I can confidently say that Legends has the first mainline story, since the Gen 5 games, that I've thoroughly enjoyed. A very solid narrative coupled with a beautifully crafted world made this game feel like a genuine adventure and a great experience to play through.
I love it!
Now, let's talk a bit about the freedom of the player. This is more of a minor point since I already touched on it while talking about the world of the game, but recent Pokemon games have handled story progression rather rigidly. From a hop interrupting you every 10 meters when you enter a new city, to locking facilities from the player until they've beaten the Pokemon League. The mainline series has almost always had a pretty linear way of leading you through the game. Lots of guiding you in the specific directions they want you to take while blocking any alternative routes. And while the main story of Legends follows this principle as well, you're given free roam over any unlocked map and can go on detours and expeditions at your leisure. But I've mentioned that part before. What I haven't mentioned yet is how we are presented with the first proper side quest system in this game, named requests. You can find these extra tasks from people all over the place, and they range from simple requests like seeing a specific Pokemon all the way to solving an ancient riddle from a book not even found in this game, but in BDSP, to then be granted an audience with and the opportunity to catch Manaphy and Fiona. The tasks are pretty varied, and while some can be rather annoying, it's a very nice change of pace from beating up lords or following wardens around. They obviously unlock over time as you progress through the story, but you can always just kinda take a break from the main path and do a few of these. Some of them just reward you with items, while others can even help you increase the effectiveness of facilities in Jubilife, like helping out the farmers with specific Pokemon to increase their harvest, or getting specific resources for the crafting core to stock up the local mart with new products. A lot of these quests also lead you to those specific areas of zones that the story left untouched, so you can utilize them as something akin to a treasure map, leading you to unknown places with new Pokemon for you to discover. It's a small but very nice addition that allows you to focus on things aside from the main story without feeling restricted. Finally, let's bring this to a close with the aspect of fantasy as a whole. Now, I'm gonna preface this, once again, by acknowledging that this does also kind of fit into atmosphere and fluency, but please forgive me for that, since the game mashes together very well, and the world as a complete package just feels very enveloping. I could technically just write an entire essay with most of these previously mentioned points and call it atmosphere, which would turn into a pretty lengthy point. So I've done my best here to make this a bit more bite-sized and broken down into subtopics. That being said, what I want to talk about in this fantasy category are gameplay mechanics that have been present in the series for a long time, but they've been made more interactive and player-oriented. What I mean is basically just fan service.
Nice.
Didn't you always want to throw a Pokeball? Well, now you can, and they even have varying properties depending on what ball you use. Wanted to let your Pokemon outside of battle and get a bit more than just one line of dialogue as a reaction? Got that covered as well. You can even have an emote-based conversation with them. And if you throw one against another, they'll start interacting and basically just try to outflex the opposition. You can also just watch them sit down and relax after a while, or wait for them to fall asleep. Don't question watching your Pokemon sleep in the middle of the town square, or having a gathering, just enjoy it, okay? Oh yeah, you know how flying is just a quick animation and then it cuts away? They tried changing that in Auras, but really you're basically just flying on a glorified minimap there. I appreciate the attempt, but it's not quite what most people had in mind. So, how about having full control over flying, swimming, climbing and all the movement options you could want? The only exception being the transition between maps and the town. We got that covered as well. As you progress, you gain the aid of some Lord Pokemon, and they help you in traversing the rough landscape of the Hisui region. You can fly or glide, I guess, climb and swim freely. Also, if you try to catch Pokemon while swimming with Basculegion, you get a cool Breath of the Wild-esque bullet time to aim your Pokeball. The angles on this are kinda weird because of your momentum, so that could be improved upon, but I really enjoy these options that you can mix and match to traverse the region in your own style. And if you need training, there are even these balloon races to see if you can make the most out of all of your movement options. There's a lot more small things like being able to throw berries to lure out Pokemon, and researching their favorite food instead of their favorite being determined by their nature, and only really being used for contests. A lot of these changes aren't particularly massive or game-changing. Sometimes the old mechanic even remains in the game, as for example you can still just let the game throw the Pokeball for you if you've entered into a battle with the Pokemon. But all these little things just give the player more control, which is always appreciated, and it brings you just a bit closer to the freestyle kind of actions you've seen in the anime over a decade ago and always kinda imagined doing, but never could in the actual games. I mean, there's a reason the idea of a 3D open world Pokemon game has been around for ages, with some people even creating fan versions of said games. It's just what we always imagined it would be like living in the Pokemon world, but until now it was hindered by the static systems behind the game. I certainly hope they keep breaking out of the old shell of Pokemon gameplay and continue making these kind of games, that free the franchise being slow, purely turn-based RPGs with little flexibility, as Legends has shown that an evolving style and a daring creative approach can bring so much new magic to the Pokemon franchise and create a world filled with more adventure than ever before. Alright then, let's wrap this up, shall we? I think you've realized my stance on this game already, but allow me to put it in words. Let's keep it short. I love this game. The end. Just kidding. But it is a pretty accurate statement. I adore almost every aspect of this game, and for the first time in a while, I've actually enjoyed myself all the way through a mainline Pokemon game. Most recent entries have just made me annoyed with all of the rushed production and the resulting cut content, but Legends has felt like an actual adventure, filled with passion for the franchise. I didn't just feel empty halfway through, only pushing myself to play in order to get a decent team for online battles. While constantly feeling like I could just play a decade-old game of the series and have more fun. Looking at you, BDSP, you're just an insult to Platinum at this point. Everything felt new and exciting, and it was exactly the kind of fresh air I wanted from this game. It's far from perfect, and there's definitely potential for improvement all around, but I think Legends does a lot right, and finally utilizes the fantasy of the Pokemon franchise in an open environment. And who knows, while I was still making this video, we got a free content update for the game and the announcement for Gen 9 as an open world adventure. So chances are they'll keep upgrading Legends for a while and potentially even carry on with this new gameplay style in an all new generation. Now, to be fair, I know people like hype news, but Arceus released this January and they plan to release the new generation this year.
Ooh, that's kind of small. Yikes.
I'm just gonna hope we aren't looking at another rushed waste of potential here. But those textures though, crispy. Anyway, let's end this on a positive note. I don't really think going over every aspect I highlighted again is necessary. It would take quite a bit, and I already went pretty in depth earlier. So let me just summarize it a bit and make a nice closing statement. I believe Pokemon Legends Arceus has marked a big step for the Pokemon franchise, out of the archaic slow system and into a completely new world. A game set in the past feels like the most modern Pokemon game to date, and I ideally hope they continue this trend of experimenting and advancing the old formula to draw out all that the Pokemon universe has to offer. Recent games have felt more and more like a copy and paste mess, with less and less noticeable love put into them. But Legends has finally given me a bit of hope that I don't have to stick with unofficial fan games for the rest of time, so we'll see how it develops. I truly hope they put a bit more love into the game before leaving it be, like some nice endgame activity, my previously mentioned achievement system, or even major story DLC. And honestly, I just want the Legends series to become a recurring thing. I absolutely love story-focused games, and regions like Unova would be amazing to continue this game style. Just imagine getting to witness the original dragon of Unova. Maybe you could even be involved in the stories of the two brothers who led to its separation. There's just untold possibilities for these kind of games, and I pray that this was just the first step in grasping all of the franchise's potential. With actual challenging boss fights, a great story, and a rich and beautiful world to explore, I truly felt like I was having a great adventure in the Pokemon world for the first time in a long while, and I hope that we get the chance to go on many more journeys on this level. I will probably let you know how Gen 9 holds up to the standard when it releases, but until then I'll enjoy my time in Hisui a bit more. If you watched up until now, thank you for your attention, and please feel free to share some experiences of your own Hisui adventure down in the comments. Until next time, see ya!